I know there are parts of the country where Labour has lost support to UKIP. I don't think it's a straightforward equation that one balances the other out. I think it's more complex than that. Yes, there has been some loss of support, but I'm not sure I really take a lot of what Frank Field says seriously these days. Sorry. But as I say, I'm allowed to because that's my hometown, Birkenhead, that he represents.
He's a very thoughtful guy, but I think the point that he's missed is that the nature of the political dynamics in the country has changed, and people are not as party political or as kind of fixed in their political views as they once were. And I think that's an element which we as a party have missed. So I think people are much more willing to vote differentially. So if you've got local council elections, and let's just say for the sake of argument, you've got an elected mayor and a council elections and a general election all going on at the same time, people are much more inclined now to vote differently in each of those on the same day as they ever were in the past. And the reasons are many and various why that is. So I don't think it's as easy as saying that it's our position on the European Union that is the problem. I don't think it is. I think the problem is much more serious than that. In certain parts of the country, there is no doubt about it, in certain parts of the country, Labour have taken their traditional working class support for granted. And it's a criticism of ourselves that we've got to be able to face up to and say that the work has not been done. In the deputy leadership election, Ben Bradshaw, the MP for Exeter, told a story about when he was going to help in the Scottish referendum election, and that he went into one solidly Labour-held constituency and asked what their contact rate was. This is the number of people that they've actually knocked on the door and asked people, and they hadn't done any of it. This was a Labour-held seat, and they had not done any of it because they were taking that vote for granted. We'd not done the work in terms of getting out and talking to people, finding out what the issues are, because people's issues are what's going to drive our party forward and making them believe that we're on their side. Just another anecdote. I was out doing a bit of door knocking in Weymouth a couple of weeks ago, and I knocked on this door, the usual kind of questions. This particular person was a Labour voter, had always voted Labour, would never vote anything other than Labour, but was absolutely vehemently opposed to our membership of the European Union. And I said to this person, "Is that going to make any difference to your voting Labour?" "Oh no." So I don't think it's as straightforward as that, because it's about much broader issues and about trying to demonstrate that, irrespective of that question, as important as it is, we are on the sides of the people who are struggling in this country to actually, live from one day to the next.
Labour voters have a variety of views. We've always been a broad sort of church in that respect. What I think is that the political scene, as Patrick says, has changed. We're running at 30% of the polls at the moment. And John Curtis, the professor who looks at all this stuff, says you're likely to lose 200 seats in Labour councils. 200 seats, maybe a bit more. We're not really, I think, hitting the right notes as a Labour Party in the Britain. We're somehow running ragged. We don't have a clear focus on a clear policy which is appealing. And I think the referendum on Europe is one of the issues which divides us. Now, the Labour Party has always had issues which divide us. We've always had a right wing and a progressive group. We've always had a left wing and a hard left. We've always had that. But we've got to come together, as you quite rightly say, and show that we are on the side of our pool of people who are, I'm going to use the word, working class particularly, but also on the side of the people who are working, because this country is run, as was referred to a moment ago, by a little elite of bloody millionaires who put it all in their own self-interest all the time. They don't ever think about the interests of the majority of people in this country, and their policies are directed only at their own self-interest. And we have to actually combat that as well. I think we have to take on the elites and their smug attitudes about they're just shirkers, they're spongers, they're this and they're that. The vilification of so many of us. We have to be the champions of all of us. And I think that's important. And we can't just say, as Frank Field said, I think, oh, we're losing votes to UKIP because of our stance on Europe. We're losing votes to some people on our stance on Europe. We're gaining votes from people because of our stance on Europe. You know, I haven't seen any real analysis of that, but it does seem to me that the referendum vote is dividing the country on quite different lines from the party lines. Absolutely.
Yeah. You know, if we look back at the 70s, I think we understood the 70s and we kind of understood the world up to about the 1970s, and then for me, and perhaps it's just my age, the world seemed to speed up quite a lot and things seemed to change very, very markedly. From roughly, probably roughly around Thatcher on. It was probably happening a bit before Thatcher, but it was probably from there on. And there's a whole load of economic stuff going on behind the scenes. There's all sorts of things feeding into that. So the EU thing, for me, I totally agree. We're dividing along different lines, and I'll tell you the other thing, we're dividing along, in my view, for the vote itself, quite instinctive lines. I think all that information, which nobody believes, that's being put out there, will be almost useless. I think people already know, and people will say they're undecided, but I don't think they're going to read anything in any leaflet or pamphlet given out by anyone that they will either believe or that will really sway them. I really don't. And I hate to sound, you know, to say that, because that kind of negates a lot of what we do. But, you know, it's quite a visceral thing, our relationship with Europe. And I think that's how people will vote.
Let's suppose, for the sake of this argument, that the vote is to remain in the European Union. Let's just think about that. Where are UKIP going to go? My view is that UKIP are going to revert to type. They are racists, they are xenophobic, they are nationalists in the worst sense of the word. So where are they going to go? They are going to look to reform themselves, because they're not going to go away. They're going to look to reform themselves, and the model they are going to look to is the model that we're beginning to see emerge of the far right in Europe. That's where they're going to go. So the pitch which they're making at the moment to be the working man's friend and the anti-Tory will have gone out the window, because they will have to reshape themselves, because there are no votes for them there, because they've not been able to persuade the public that that is a true assessment of their position. So we are going to be able, in my view, if we remain in, we are going to be able to expose UKIP for what they are, and that gives us, if we work hard enough, it gives us an opportunity to get those votes back. Now, what happens if we have a vote to come out? If we come out, my view is there'll be a general election within 6 months, and we'll see a significant more than one UKIP member of Parliament. And frankly, that is not a vision of this country that I particularly want to entertain.
It's not that we necessarily turned our backs on the working class. We did, but the reason we did it is because we didn't know who the working class were anymore. We couldn't identify them in the same way that we used to be able to identify them. We couldn't find them. We didn't know where they were, we didn't know what they looked like. And then maybe when we realised they looked like chavs, we kind of went, oh, God, no. because they don't vote. And they're not educated enough, and that's not what we want, because we want organisation in the workplace, and we want, you know, all that 20th century stuff, which was fantastic, but we haven't transposed it into the 21st century yet. We haven't understood how to do that, and I don't think we yet know how to do that.